Picture an old man sitting quietly on his porch, watching the world rush by in its endless pursuit of happiness, success, and meaning. While everyone around him chases the next promotion, the perfect relationship, or the ideal life, he possesses something they're all desperately seeking: deep peace, unshakable wisdom, and the ability to remain calm in any storm. What does he know that they don't? Throughout history, every culture has recognized certain individuals who seem to possess an almost supernatural understanding of human nature. They're the elders who can see through pretense, who understand motivations before people understand them themselves, and who can predict the consequences of choices with disturbing accuracy. We call this old man's wisdom, but what if this wisdom isn't mystical at all? What if everything these wise elders understood about human nature has been systematically validated by one of the most brilliant psychological minds in history? What if Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who revolutionized our understanding of the human psyche, spent his entire career proving that ancient wisdom contains the most practical guidance for living a fulfilled life? Right now, millions of people are struggling with anxiety, depression, relationship problems, and a profound sense that something is missing from their lives. They're trying to solve 21st century problems with 21st century solutions, not realizing that the answers they're seeking were discovered thousands of years ago and confirmed by decades of psychological research. Before we embark on this potentially life-changing journey, engage with this content. Subscribe to this channel, hit that like button if you're ready to discover wisdom that has stood the test of time, and drop a comment about the biggest life challenge you're currently facing. Share this with someone who's searching for deeper meaning and practical guidance in their life. Over the next few minutes, we're going to explore 7 profound principles that have guided wise individuals throughout history. Principles that Jung's research reveals as fundamental truths about human psychology. These aren't abstract philosophical concepts, but practical tools for transformation that can revolutionize how you approach every aspect of your life. The revelation waiting at the end of this exploration will show you how to access the same clarity and peace that wise elders have possessed throughout human history. Are you ready to discover what they know that you don't? Let's begin with a disturbing paradox that reveals why ancient wisdom has become more relevant than ever. We live in the most materially prosperous, medically advanced, and technologically connected era in human history, yet rates of anxiety, depression, and existential emptiness have reached epidemic proportions. How is this possible? Dr. Tim Cass's research at Knox College reveals that societies focused primarily on material achievement and external validation consistently produce higher rates of mental health problems, relationship difficulties, and what psychologists call existential vacuum, a profound sense that life lacks meaning and purpose. Jung understood this paradox decades before modern research confirmed it. He wrote extensively about what he called the neurosis of our time, the collective psychological illness that emerges when societies lose connection to deeper sources of meaning and wisdom. He observed that as traditional sources of guidance disappeared, people became increasingly lost, anxious, and dependent on external authorities to tell them how to live. Consider this carefully. When did you last make an important decision based on your own deep understanding rather than external advice? When did you last feel genuinely confident in your ability to navigate life's challenges without constantly seeking validation, reassurance, or guidance from others? This dependence on external direction is exactly what ancient wisdom traditions warned against. Whether we look at Stoic philosophy, Buddhist teachings, or indigenous wisdom traditions, they all emphasized the same fundamental principle. True strength, peace, and wisdom must come from within. No external achievement, relationship, or circumstance can provide lasting fulfillment. Jung's clinical work confirmed this ancient insight through decades of treating patients who had achieved everything society promised would make them happy: wealth, status, perfect relationships, yet remained profoundly miserable. He discovered that lasting psychological health requires what he called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are rather than who society expects you to be. But before we can understand how to access this inner wisdom, we need to recognize the specific ways that modern life systematically disconnects us from our authentic selves. Here's the first piece of ancient wisdom that Jung's research validates. The relentless pursuit of external validation is not just ineffective, it's psychologically destructive. Every wise tradition has understood that seeking your worth through others' opinions creates a prison of perpetual insecurity. Jung's concept of the persona explains exactly why this happens. The persona is the mask we wear to gain social acceptance, the carefully constructed image we present to the world. While some degree of social adaptation is necessary, Jung discovered that people who become too identified with their persona lose connection to their authentic self, leading to what he called persona inflation. Dr. Kristin Neff's groundbreaking research on self-compassion demonstrates that individuals who derive their self-worth from external achievements, grades, promotions, social media likes, relationship status, experience significantly higher rates of anxiety, depression, and emotional instability than those who develop internal sources of validation. Think about this honestly. How much of your daily emotional state depends on other people's reactions to you? How often do you feel good about yourself only when others approve of your choices? How frequently do you change your behavior, opinions, or goals based on what you think others want to see? Ancient Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius understood this trap intimately. In his personal journal, Meditations, he wrote about the futility of seeking happiness through others' opinions, how much trouble he avoids when he does not look to see what his neighbor says or does. This wasn't philosophical theory, it was practical psychology based on deep self-observation. Jung's patients consistently struggled with this same issue. Those who had built their entire identity around external success felt hollow and anxious whenever that success was threatened. They had never developed what he called inner authority, the ability to validate themselves based on authentic values rather than social expectations. This leads us to the second principle that ancient wisdom understood, and Jung confirmed: the necessity of developing internal authority and authentic self-knowledge. The second profound insight that wise elders throughout history have understood is that lasting peace and effectiveness come from developing what we might call internal authority, the ability to make decisions based on deep self-knowledge rather than external pressures or expectations. Jung spent years studying what he called the process of individuation, the psychological development that allows a person to become their authentic self rather than a collection of social expectations. He discovered that individuals who successfully complete this process possess an almost unshakable inner stability that external circumstances cannot disturb. Dr. Marsha Linehan's research on emotional regulation reveals that people who can access their authentic values and make decisions based on internal wisdom show remarkable resilience to stress, criticism, and setbacks. They're not invulnerable to pain, but they don't derive their sense of reality from external validation. Consider the difference between these two approaches to a major life decision. The externally oriented person asks, "What will others think? What's the safe choice? What should I do according to social expectations?" The internally oriented person asks, "What aligns with my deepest values? What choice would I make if I had to live with the consequences alone? What does my authentic self truly want?" Ancient wisdom traditions developed specific practices for cultivating this internal authority. Buddhist meditation teaches right mindfulness, the ability to observe your thoughts and emotions without being controlled by them. Stoic practices like daily self-examination help develop what Marcus Aurelius called the discipline of desire, making choices based on virtue rather than impulse. Jung discovered that people who develop strong internal authority share certain characteristics. They're comfortable with uncertainty, they can tolerate disapproval without losing their sense of self, they make decisions based on long-term values rather than short-term emotions, and they take responsibility for their choices without blaming external circumstances. But developing this internal authority requires confronting something that most people spend their lives avoiding. And this brings us to the third principle that separates wise individuals from those who remain trapped in perpetual struggle. The third principle that appears in every wisdom tradition, and that Jung's research confirms, is perhaps the most difficult for modern people to accept. the necessity of distinguishing between what you can control and what you cannot, and finding peace through focusing entirely on what lies within your power. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who was born into slavery and understood powerlessness intimately, developed what became known as the dichotomy of control. He taught that human suffering comes primarily from trying to control things beyond our power: other people's behavior, external outcomes, past events, or future circumstances. Jung's clinical observations confirmed this ancient insight through decades of treating patients who exhausted themselves trying to control uncontrollable variables. He noticed that anxiety, resentment, and depression often stemmed from what he called inflation of the ego, the unconscious belief that we should be able to control more than we actually can. Dr. Stephen Hayes's research on psychological flexibility demonstrates that individuals who can accept uncertainty and focus on their responses rather than trying to control outcomes show significantly better mental health, relationship satisfaction, and overall life effectiveness. Think carefully about your current sources of stress. How many involve situations where you're trying to control other people's behavior? How often are you anxious about outcomes that depend on factors beyond your influence? How much energy do you spend trying to change past events or guarantee future results? Ancient wisdom understood that this misdirection of energy creates what Buddhists call suffering and what Stoics call passion, emotional disturbance that comes from fighting reality rather than working skillfully with it. The wise person learns to channel all their energy into what they can actually influence: their thoughts, actions, values, and responses. This principle directly leads to the fourth insight that wise individuals possess: the ability to find meaning and purpose, even in difficult circumstances. The fourth principle that ancient wisdom teaches and Jung's research validates is perhaps the most transformative: the understanding that meaning can be found in any circumstance, including suffering, when approached with the right psychological framework. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist heavily influenced by Jung's work, discovered through the most extreme circumstances imaginable that humans can maintain psychological health and even find purpose in the face of unthinkable suffering, but only if they can discover meaning in their experience. Jung's concept of the transcendent function explains how this psychological transformation occurs. When we can hold the tension between opposing experiences, pain and growth, loss and wisdom, struggle and strength, we develop what he called the transcendent attitude that allows us to extract meaning from any situation. Dr. Kristin Neff's research on post-traumatic growth reveals that individuals who can find meaning in their struggles often develop greater resilience, deeper empathy, stronger relationships, and clearer life purpose than those who never face significant challenges. Consider how different life becomes when you shift from asking, "Why is this happening to me?" to "What can I learn from this? How can this experience contribute to my development? What meaning can I create from this situation?" This isn't positive thinking or denial. It's what psychologists call benefit finding. Ancient traditions understood this principle intimately. Buddhist teachings on the noble truths acknowledge that suffering is inevitable, but that it can become a source of wisdom and compassion. Stoic practices like the view from above help people find perspective and meaning even in painful circumstances. This ability to transform suffering into wisdom leads directly to the fifth principle that characterizes truly wise individuals: the development of what Jung called psychological maturity. The fifth principle that separates wise elders from those who remain psychologically young, regardless of their chronological age, is the development of what Jung called psychological maturity: the ability to take full responsibility for your inner life without blaming external circumstances. Jung observed that many people reach physical adulthood without achieving psychological maturity. They remain what he called eternal children, individuals who expect life to be fair, who blame others for their emotional states, and who avoid taking responsibility for their own development and happiness. Dr. Robert Kegan's research on adult development reveals that true psychological maturity involves what he calls self-authoring consciousness, the ability to create your own meaning, values, and identity rather than simply adopting what others expect or what circumstances provide. Psychological maturity manifests in several specific ways: taking responsibility for your emotional reactions without blaming others, making decisions based on principles rather than impulses, accepting that life includes both joy and sorrow without demanding constant happiness, and understanding that personal growth requires effort and often discomfort. Ancient wisdom traditions developed specific practices for cultivating this maturity. Confucian teachings on self-cultivation emphasized the lifelong work of character development. Buddhist practices of mindful awareness develop the ability to observe your mental and emotional patterns without being controlled by them. Jung discovered that psychologically mature individuals share certain characteristics. They can tolerate ambiguity and uncertainty. They don't need constant reassurance or validation. They can maintain their values under pressure, and they view challenges as opportunities for growth rather than threats to avoid. This psychological maturity naturally leads to the sixth principle that wise people throughout history have embodied: the integration of all aspects of personality, including those we'd prefer to ignore. The sixth principle that ancient wisdom understood, and Jung made central to his psychological theory, is perhaps the most challenging: the necessity of integrating what he called the shadow, the rejected, denied, or undeveloped aspects of your personality. Jung observed that most people spend enormous energy trying to maintain an idealized self-image by projecting their unwanted qualities onto others. This creates what he called shadow projection, seeing in others the very traits we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. Dr. Halstone's research on voice dialogue demonstrates that individuals who can acknowledge and integrate their contradictory aspects, their capacity for both kindness and selfishness, strength and weakness, wisdom and foolishness, develop greater psychological flexibility and authenticity. Ancient traditions understood this integration process intimately. Hindu teachings on embracing the dark goddess acknowledge that wholeness requires accepting destructive as well as creative aspects of existence. Christian mystical traditions speak of the dark night of the soul as a necessary passage toward spiritual maturity. Shadow integration doesn't mean acting on every impulse or abandoning moral principles. It means acknowledging that you contain the full spectrum of human potential, both light and dark, and learning to work consciously with these energies rather than denying or projecting them. The practical benefits of shadow work are profound. You become less judgmental of others because you recognize their struggles in yourself. You develop greater emotional resilience because you're not maintaining an artificial self-image, and you access previously unavailable energy and creativity that was trapped in maintaining psychological defenses. This integration of all aspects of self leads to the seventh and final principle that characterizes truly wise individuals: the development of what Jung called the transcendent function. The seventh and culminating principle that ancient wisdom teaches and Jung's research validates is the development of what he called the transcendent function, the ability to hold paradoxes, integrate opposites, and find creative solutions that honor multiple aspects of reality simultaneously. Jung discovered that psychological health requires the ability to hold tension between competing values, desires, and perspectives without prematurely resolving that tension through one-sided thinking. This capacity to tolerate ambiguity and find creative synthesis is what distinguishes wisdom from mere knowledge. Dr. Jennifer Aker's research on the paradox of choice reveals that individuals who can embrace complexity and hold multiple perspectives simultaneously make better decisions, experience less regret, and show greater life satisfaction than those who seek simple, black-and-white solutions. Ancient wisdom traditions cultivated this transcendent capacity through various practices. Taoist teachings on the middle way emphasize finding balance between extremes. Greek philosophy developed dialectical thinking, the ability to hold opposing ideas in creative tension until a higher truth emerges. The transcendent function manifests in practical ways: being able to love someone while acknowledging their flaws, pursuing goals while accepting that outcomes aren't guaranteed, maintaining hope while accepting difficult realities, and making difficult decisions without needing absolute certainty. Jung believed that developing the transcendent function was essential for what he called individuation, becoming a complete, integrated human being capable of contributing meaningfully to collective human development. These 7 principles work together to create what ancient traditions called wisdom, and what Jung understood as psychological wholeness. But knowing these principles intellectually is different from embodying them practically. Understanding these 7 principles intellectually is only the beginning. The real transformation comes from integrating them into daily life through consistent practice. Here's how to begin implementing ancient wisdom backed by Jungian psychology in your everyday experience. Start each day with what Marcus Aurelius called morning reflection. Spend 10 minutes considering, what can I control today and what must I accept? How can I respond to challenges from my authentic values rather than reactive emotions? What internal authority will guide my decisions today? Throughout the day, practice what Jung called holding the tension of opposites. When facing difficult situations, resist the urge to oversimplify. Ask yourself, what multiple perspectives might be valid here? How can I honor competing values without betraying my authentic self? What creative solution might integrate different aspects of this situation? In relationships, practice shadow awareness by noticing when you feel strong judgments about others. Ask, what aspect of myself am I seeing reflected in this person? How might their behavior reveal something I need to integrate in myself? How can I respond from understanding rather than projection? End each day with what ancient traditions called examination of conscience. Not self-criticism, but honest self-reflection. How did I live according to my deepest values today? Where did I act from external pressure rather than internal authority? What can I learn from today's experiences? Most importantly, approach this practice with what Jung called active patience, the understanding that wisdom develops gradually through consistent effort rather than sudden insight. The goal isn't perfection, but authentic development towards psychological wholeness. These practices transform abstract principles into lived wisdom that creates the same inner stability and clarity that wise elders have possessed throughout history. Let's return to the image of the wise old man sitting peacefully on his porch, possessing something that everyone around him desperately seeks. Now, you understand what he knows that they don't. He has internalized these 7 timeless principles and integrated them into his daily life through years of conscious practice. He doesn't seek external validation because he has developed internal authority. He doesn't try to control uncontrollable circumstances because he focuses his energy on what lies within his power. He finds meaning in all experiences, including difficult ones, because he understands that growth requires both light and shadow. He has achieved psychological maturity by taking full responsibility for his inner life. Most importantly, he has integrated all aspects of his personality and developed the transcendent function that allows him to hold complexity, paradox, and ambiguity without losing his inner stability. This is what ancient traditions called wisdom and what Jung understood as individuation, becoming fully human. The remarkable truth that Jung's research reveals is that this wisdom isn't reserved for a special few. It's the natural result of applying these timeless principles consistently over time. Every person has the potential to develop the same clarity, peace, and effectiveness that wise elders possess. The choice is yours. You can continue seeking fulfillment through external achievements, other people's approval, and attempts to control uncontrollable circumstances. Or you can begin the profound work of developing internal authority, psychological maturity, and authentic wisdom. Start today with just one principle. Choose the one that resonates most strongly with your current life situation and begin practicing it consistently. Notice how it changes not just your external circumstances, but your internal relationship to whatever circumstances arise. Tell us in the comments which principle speaks to you most powerfully and how you plan to begin implementing it. Like this video if it's helped you understand the connection between ancient wisdom and practical psychology, and subscribe for more explorations into the timeless principles that create lasting fulfillment. Most importantly, share this wisdom with others who are ready to move beyond superficial solutions and develop the deep inner resources that create genuine peace and effectiveness in life. The wisdom of the ages is available to you right now. The only question is whether you're ready to do the inner work necessary to claim it. Until next time, remember that wisdom isn't something you acquire, but something you become through the patient work of conscious living and authentic development.